I feel like there's a lot of hyperbole in the world of video games. When a new game comes out, there's people saying that it's the greatest game of all time, and then there's other people saying that it's the worst game of all time. And they argue back and forth until they find a new game to argue about, and the cycle repeats itself endlessly. But for older games, the deliberation has ended, and the general public has usually already come to an agreement about how to judge these games. Some are forgettable, some are pretty good, others are amazing, but some are downright masterpieces to be treasured and studied as an almost perfect example from a time long forgotten. Donkey Kong Country is not one of these games. Coming out in the year 1994, this was Donkey Kong's first main series title, which familiarized audiences with the character, world, and the redefined series as a whole. This game was successful enough to spawn a few sequels, which eventually led to a similarly well-received reboot on the Wii. Just saying the name Donkey Kong Country makes retro gamers go into an uncontrollable fit of nostalgic ecstasy. This game was crazy revolutionary for its time. It looked amazing because of its fancy pre-rendered graphics. The music is still great. It gave Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong a personality as well as introduced a bunch of other characters. It's easy to understand how audiences were so starstruck with this title when it first released. But it's now 25 years later, so I feel like the glamour has kinda worn off, and it might be time to take a fair look at it. And I know the nostalgia will never fade for some people, but I didn't play this game as a kid. I have no fond memories of it. I have no bias one way or the other. I just wanted to play it because it's a popular game and see what all the fuss is about. Playing through the first few levels was nothing special, a little simplistic but still enjoyable. The music is great, it looks unique, it's a fine game. But then I hit Monkey Mines, the second area, and at this point in the game the difficulty goes from like 35 to 150 real quick. And that would be okay, but it's not a good difficulty. Think about it like this. I'm sure at some point in your life you've been playing a game and then something happens so quickly, something you can't even react to, and you die. And you think to yourself, well, that was kind of bullshit. Maybe it's something you feel like you have no control over, a situation where you're helplessly trapped, and you die. That's bad difficulty. Good difficulty is putting the player in a difficult situation, but still keeping all of their options clear and open. There aren't any surprises, the player knows everything they need to in order to succeed, and if they die, well, it's the player's fault. The game didn't trick you into failing. That's good difficulty. And I know this might just seem like some guy that's bad at video games just complaining. Like, we all know someone that is used to the excuse, I didn't hit that button, I hit the other button, he's not doing what I told him to do, and it's like, dude, this is a video game. You obviously did push the button. You are in full control of your character, but there are legitimate situations in certain games where the player is killed unfairly. And it's sad to say, but this is a large reason as to why Donkey Kong Country is not a masterpiece. The most glaring issue in the game is its enemy placement in conjunction with its pretty bad camera. It's zoomed in just a bit too far, and if you're casually running forward, you'll probably get hit before you even see what it was that hit you. Here are some examples of what I'm talking about. Now let's just take a look at this very scientific graphic I just made, comparing this to a much better platformer that came out 4 years before this one, Mario World. Donkey Kong Country's camera is about 40% more zoomed than Mario World's, just going off the scale of each character. And then the enemies seem to move faster, and projectile enemies shoot as soon as they're spawned. Like, sometimes they're not even on the screen, and you see their projectile coming at you. You can't even react, you die. Other times, enemies are just placed in really difficult areas, and it's like, how am I even supposed to do this without getting hit? Now, yeah, the pre-rendered 3D looks nice, whatever, but you can't clearly see collision boxes, and that makes it kinda difficult to do some precision platforming. In Mario World, they keep the collision very clear, and it's much easier to do in Mario because it's so stylized. Like, you see a line of blocks floating in the air, you don't question it because it's Mario. I understand that it wouldn't have looked nice to be playing this super fancy looking game and having to land on rectangular shaped platforms, but they could have made it just a bit more clear, or at least make some compromises like Super Metroid or even Hollow Knight. Because when I get to this part in Snow Barrel Blast, and I'm worrying because I don't know where exactly to land in order to collide with the small patch of ground, that's not excusable in a platforming game. You just see this blob of snow and you don't want to land too far to the right because this is an icy level and you're slip sliding all over the place. So it's like, is this good enough? No, I died. See, this is bad difficulty because it's unclear. The challenge is in knowing where to land rather than actually landing in the correct position. And maybe these things could be excused if not for the health system that this game has, or perhaps lack thereof. If you have both Kongs, you can get hit and the other one runs away. But if you just have one Kong, getting hit once kills you. So a lot of times you have to deal with this ridiculous enemy placement, an overabundance of bottomless cliffs, imprecise platforming, and awful camera without screwing up once. And Kong barrels that give you the other monkey aren't exactly the most plentiful resource. So a lot of times you're essentially forced to memorize a level because you can't see enough of it to react in time. Quite often I found myself inching forward step by step to make sure I didn't get hit by something or fall off a cliff or die in some other fashion. I don't know. It's like playing Sonic Adventure and at the back of your mind, there's this worry that at any time you could clip through the ground and die. The bosses suck because they're all too easy, except for K. Rool, who makes you memorize a pattern. Compare this to Mario World's bosses, who don't explicitly require you to memorize anything. It's a lot more freeform, I guess I would say. The bosses in Donkey Kong Country are more similar to regular enemies that require more hits to kill. In Mario World, the bosses are unique enemies that have interesting attacks. Well, more interesting than just buzzing around. And yet, this game is still very lovable. Even though I've just spent however many minutes hating on it, I could go back and play it, but just give me like a week to recover. Regardless of how well it performed, there still isn't a platformer quite like it, with the animal companions and the characters and the music and graphics, the barrels that require absolutely precise timing, and the genuine joy in finding a new secret room on your own. I can understand it, and as I'm writing this a day after I finished playing, I find it's much easier to remember the highs of Donkey Kong Country than it is the lows. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of little issues that pile up and put a damper on the whole experience. And it's for these reasons I refuse to call this game one of the best of all time, and not even one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. It has a lot of good ideas. Like, it should be one of my favorite platformers, and if it controlled better, if the hitboxes were more clear and the camera was zoomed out a bit and enemies weren't placed in bullshit locations, maybe it would be. But no matter how thick your nostalgia goggles are, these issues can't be ignored. Yeah, it looks nice, it sounds nice, the whole theme of the game is really nice, but the actual gameplay is not a masterpiece. And maybe that was just a result of a new team of people making their first game. It's possible the sequels are better. I don't know, I've never played them, but maybe if the interest is there for me to talk about them, I'll give it a shot. I want to like this game. I feel like it's so close to being really good, but there's so many goofs here and there, and I can't look past them. At the time, when there was so little out there to compare it to, I guess I can see why people put up with these shenanigans, but 25 years later, it just doesn't hold up.